You know those times when you come across looking ugly and then you try to explain your comments, but you dig yourself an even deeper hole? Yeah? Well, let's review the Fox News host Laura Ingraham and the week she has had thus far. Here she was on Wednesday, making a comment so questionable, it drew applause from the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Because in some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for, and most of us don't like. From Virginia to California, we see stark examples of how radically, in some ways, the country has changed. Now, much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love.
Did you hear what she said there? She said illegal and legal immigration. So when she tries to clean this up and say this is all about law and order, how could it possibly be about law and order if you're going after legal immigration? At worst, these are the words of a white supremacist. At best, it's playing on anxiety of a part of our culture. And I ask the question, why? KKK icon David Duke, he loved what he heard so much, he got out there and tweeted about it in a now deleted post. But do not worry. Laura Ingraham is a national TV celebrity, so she has had plenty of chances to explain that she is definitely not a racist. She waited a full 24 hours and said this.
The purpose of last night's angle was to point out that the rule of law, meaning secure borders, is something that used to bind our country together. And despite what some may be contending, I made explicitly clear that my commentary had nothing to do with race or ethnicity.
Ma'am, you made explicitly clear when you said illegal and legal. All an innocent misunderstanding, is that what we're supposed to take this as? But just in case, I invite you to take a very good look at the words used. Massive demographic changes have been foisted on the American people, and they are changes that none of us ever voted for. And most of us don't like. We know exactly what demographics refer to because the Census Bureau spells it out for us: the age, sex, and racial composition of a population. So if Ms. Ingraham has no problem with racial changes in demographics, is she up in arms that there are too many old people, too many young people, too many men, too many women? It gets extra fishy when you scroll through some of Ingraham's hateful, offensive statements over the years.
By the way, the jails are, what, 27% illegal immigrants? Why don't we ship them back home and say, you come again, you'll be shot crossing the border? The Christians, who we can verifiably say are Christians who are in the threat of being slaughtered, I'm happy to bring in some of them. I think most people would. But all these other people, they got to stay in the Middle East.
And the thing about the Mexicans and murderers and rapists.
Oh, they have come here. They have come here to murder and rape our people. We know that.
Now, the price they have to pay for multiculturalism is the risk that you walking on the sidewalk and a man will, or a woman will purposely mow you down. And then while you're maybe finishing your cappuccino in a cafe or having a drink, someone will put a knife to your throat and slit it with the attempt perhaps to behead you. Must they run their mouths like that? You're great players, but no one voted for you. Millions elected Trump to be their coach. So keep the political commentary to yourself, or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
I believe it was you, Laura Ingraham, who said shut up and dribble. And I can only speak for myself, but I want to thank LeBron James for the school he opened last week, for the commitment to philanthropy he's made over the years, and all of those kids that he's now putting into his new school, and the many who he has already granted scholarships to in his hometown of Akron, Ohio. So thank you, Mr. James. Joining me now, Jonathan Capehart, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and Washington Post opinion writer who is also going to be hosting AM Joy this weekend, so you better tune in, and MSNBC contributor and terror analyst Malcolm Nance. All right, Jonathan, I want to talk about what the president is doing and what Fox News is doing for him, because I see a tale of two Trumps. In terms of policy, he is exactly helping the elites. I think back to right after he won, when he walked into the 21 Club and he was caught on tape saying, I'm going to lower your taxes. And that's exactly what he has done. Or letting his buddies at Mar-a-Lago start to direct what happens at the VA. So that's what's happening on a policy perspective. But then, from a cultural perspective, he sparks these culture wars. And when you watch a Laura Ingraham, a Tucker Carlson every night play into, if it's not white nationalism, it's white anxiety. And they're paid tens of millions of dollars to do so. So I'm confused when they're railing against elites when it appears that it is elites playing into white anxiety.
What we saw in that montage of hate that you showed from Laura Ingraham is what people have been doing in this country for a long time. Playing on white anxiety, playing on hate, playing on division to distract from very real policy changes that impact those very same economically insecure white voters who see their wages stalled or falling, their jobs disappearing because the Republican Party is spending all of its time with lots of wealth redistribution away from the working people and to the elites that you're just talking about. We're all talking about Laura Ingraham. If this were a normal presidency, we would be talking about the tax laws, the president using his private golf club as a sort of policy incubator and then having these people run federal agencies de facto. That's what we're not talking about. And, you know, this wasn't the question I thought you were going to ask me because I was all set up to respond to Laura Ingraham. And there's one word to use for her and everything that you showed and everything that she said this week: deplorable. She is deplorable. The sentiment she expresses is deplorable. And the fact that she is on a cable network that most Republicans watch, that is, sorry, bosses, the #1 cable channel in the country, which means most of the country is watching hate on a nightly basis.
For sure. I mean, don't be sorry. Laura has paid millions of dollars because many people agree and believe in it. But we keep saying, well, it's the forgotten Americans who've gotten so upset. Malcolm Nance, the forgotten Americans that helped elect President Trump are not being served by his policies. Look at wages continue to lag. So it's not the forgotten American. It's the American who can no longer say, go and get that boy. Like Jeff Sessions, who got in a massive amount of trouble for once saying that to an African-American colleague. This ain't a story about the forgotten American.
No, it's not. And we've seen poll after poll come out and say that the people who elected Donald Trump were not poor white voters. For the most part, they were middle class and affluent voters. But the people who did vote for them, who were at the bottom rung, voted because they thought they would get change. And they had had 8 years of nonstop vilification of Barack Obama, who we can say at this point was the last of the normal presidents, the first 44 presidents of the United States. That being said, the things that are being said today are fundamentally un-American. I say this all the time when I'm on this show. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia there's a park called Washington Square, and it was a black cemetery during the time of the American Revolution. But buried in that cemetery is over 1,000 dead Continental soldiers who are unknown. And that is a good example of how the American experiment has always developed. There is always a new American demographic, whether the Irish in the 1800s, the Syrians and Lebanese in the late 1800s, the great Italian migration of the 1900s. Everyone's new in America because America is not a race. It's not a color. It's an idea and a belief. And we can honor those dead soldiers who fought for this revolution alongside of the people who served those who came up with this concept.
Okay, Malcolm.
Laura Ingraham does not understand that.
But then let's talk about a different American experiment, one that works for the president. It's called distract and enrage. This morning, the president took to Twitter just before 9 a.m. to again go after NFL players. When, if you think about the news cycle, what could we have been focusing on today? That a judge specifically called out the Trump administration, Kirstjen Nielsen, Jeff Sessions, about the zero tolerance policy in the inhumane treatment of migrant children. We could have been starting the day talking about Melania Trump, whose parents yesterday were made U.S. citizens, and they were able to use the family-based migration system, the system the president rails against, calling it chain migration. We could have talked about a congressman who's been arrested for insider trading. We could have led the show about Paul Manafort, the president's former campaign manager, who is now possibly facing life imprisonment for tax fraud. We could have gone after Wilbur Ross and the bombshell story that came out this week about the conflicts of interest. But nope, we didn't talk about any of those things or the fact that this is the one-year anniversary of Charlottesville, which many Republicans consider the lowest point in the president's administration. When, remember, he looked at those riots and said, blame is on many, many sides. When, remember, a peace protester, Heather Heyer, was killed. So talk about this, Jonathan. The president has now turned and said, look, the NFL, those players, those boys who have the privilege of making millions of dollars. And here's the thing, that's a winning distraction for him.
Yeah, it's a winning distraction for him, for the people who already like him, for the people who wallow in grievance and rage and hate, and for people for whom, you know, Laura Ingraham speaks, that they are worried that they're going to be left behind again, that they're going to be forgotten again in their minds. Charlottesville, to me, was among all of the horrific things President Trump has done, just on culture issues, Charlottesville was the one that was the most egregious. When a nation is hurting, when a nation is reeling at hate openly displayed, Nazis walking on the streets of an American city on live television, we look to our leaders, we look to the President of the United States to be our moral center, to be able to say to us, this is not who we are, this is not what we are about, we will come together and we will heal. He didn't do that. He did the exact opposite and ceded the moral authority of the presidency.
And he's okay with that.
Oh,
and
he's
people
absolutely
voted,
okay
Malcolm,
with that.
for the president. Oh, yes, sorry.
But the point I was trying to make, though, is a year later, a year after Charlottesville, we're hip to his game. We know what he's doing. We know what he's doing by those tweets. We know what he's doing by trying to inflame the hate and the rage. But we're not blind to it. And the fact that you read all of those things that we're not talking about because of that tweet just before 9 o'clock proves my point. Folks are not dumb. Folks are not stupid. They know what he's doing. And I think that he's going to pay the price for it.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.